Today we're going to be talking to one of Australia's leading Indonesian experts, Ibu Novi. Let's go.
Hello, Ibu Novi. Nice to see you.
Is there room for Indonesian specialists in Australia going forward?
Certainly. I think language is, if you're not wanting to become a linguist, that's absolutely fine. So, learning languages can have so many benefits. Right? So if you're doing Indonesian, you can actually combine that with other studies to kind of build some sort of expertise in a particular discipline in which language is also key. I mean, language is key in all fields. So it just gives you a different perspective, I think. It really enriches whatever else you're doing. Yeah.
And what do you find is the motivation of your students?
Motivations, hard to say, but I think it's, if you ask students, a lot of them would probably say, I really like Indonesia, for those who have been to Indonesia. Some of them would probably say, I would like to work in Indonesia. I have an Indonesian friend. It's always useful to know people, and then you get attracted to the language. So, people have many different motivations for learning it. Yeah.
So you've been teaching Indonesian for a while. Do you have any insights into how Indonesian teaching and education has changed over the years?
Oh yes, it has changed quite significantly from, say, the 1950s. I wasn't here, but the 1990s, certainly when I first started, that was the beginning of what we would call greater focus on content, on country knowledge. And with the advent of Bali bombing, with the East Timor tension and so on, people really had to think about, kind of adapting to new situations, adapting Indonesian language teaching to new situations, whereby you don't get hundreds of students, you don't get, even 80 in a classroom. But numbers is one thing, it's not really the only motivation, but I think it's important in any language learning to take into account what is happening in the country, both in Australia and Indonesia. And I think language learning should, essentially include learning about the society in which the language is used.
And in the past, that wasn't the case, right?
It was the case, but I think less explicitly so. So if you look at old textbooks, you will find that there is a description, that there's a text on Borobudur, for instance, for example. And so it's very descriptive. It's a lot less analytical than how we teach it at Sydney, certainly. So now, when we teach the language, we are encouraging students to learn, the grammar, but also to learn about Indonesian society. And society includes all sorts of things, politics included, history included.
As part of the development of teaching Indonesian in Australia, how has technology influenced what you do?
Oh, that's technology is very important in language teaching, I think. I mean, in simplest terms, now when you enroll at university, you take units, there's e-learning platform, right? So the e-learning platform is the first thing that a student comes across. It's, that's technology. But more than that also, these days, I think people can access so many resources on Indonesia and Indonesian, really publicly available, which weren't there when I was learning English many years ago. I started out learning English when I was in primary school. And so with that, I think comes just ease of learning, but also with that comes an interesting phenomenon whereby students tend to use less of their memory and more of reliance on technology.
Quick access.
Quick access,
Yeah,
yeah. So, all answers are there just about.
How does that impact language outcomes, like language learning outcomes? So does that mean they're speaking better or faster, or is it slowing the process?
I'm not, I haven't kept abreast with the literature or research in this area. I think that would be an interesting thing to find out. But certainly, I think students seem to be doing okay. So, people often think because of technology, people's grammar is bad and so on. But I think there are, positive and kind of not so positive aspects. And certainly language learning doesn't seem to be one of those. But in the classroom, when you ask students to tell you the meaning of a particular word, the first thing they would do, their inclination is to just have a look at their iPhone,
Yes.
right? So, but it doesn't mean that they don't memorize outside of the classroom, but it's just that they do that less.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, they seem to be doing all right.
Indonesian is a language that's taught in a lot of high schools and primary schools in Australia. What would you say is the biggest difference between learning Indonesian at school compared to university? And how can students transition smoothly into learning Indonesian at university?
Okay, so as far as I know, language teaching at school, or primary school certainly, it's just for fun, right? So your teacher might be teaching you about nasi goreng, about what else, dance, but really, really simple stuff. So the purpose of teaching at primary school is quite different from high school. In high school, students begin to be given texts that are descriptive but also kind of evaluative. So they develop some critical thinking skills. Now at university level, Indonesian is offered for beginners, post high school students and advanced students. But in all of these levels, I think the purpose is not just teaching the language, but there is that focus on giving students knowledge, or not giving knowledge. I think to equip them with the kinds of tools that they need to be able to understand how Indonesian society operates. So to think critically about themselves in relation to the language they're learning and the society they learn about. And so that's the big difference. It doesn't mean that it's not fun, but the type of fun is quite different. Yeah. We still listen to rock music, rock songs, and we still listen to political speeches. You listen to political speeches which you don't do at primary school level, right? And maybe not in high school. So there is that difference, because at university level, when you learn Indonesian, we want to be able to prepare students to prepare students so that they can use this language at high level when they graduate, right? At government level, at state level. So that's the idea. Yeah, so very different. Yeah.
So with the language that students are learning, Standard Indonesian is the main one. What are your thoughts on students learning Indonesian dialects or local languages? How much of a benefit is that to students learning those languages?
Right. So this is my favorite topic. So Indonesian used to be taught as a language that only had thought of, or as a language that only had one variety, namely the standard variety. And so what we used to refer to as Indonesian was the standard variety of Indonesian. Now, since the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the language has developed very rapidly, so that Indonesian now is like English. There is the style that you use to interact informally with your friends, and there is the language of political speeches that's a bit more formal. So we can't say you only learn standard Indonesian. It's just not complete if you only learn standard Indonesian, or if we teach standard Indonesian, because the minute you go out there, and I don't mean to go to Indonesia, but you know, you meet students on campus from Indonesia, how do they speak? Right? So it's, and as far as local languages, what we call ethno-local languages are concerned, I think that would enrich your learning. I think students going to Jogja, for instance, they get to learn Javanese and they find it very difficult, certainly because, you know, there are speech levels. But it also helps you to feel a little bit emplaced, you know, to feel comfortable at a place if you actually know bits and pieces about the local languages, wherever you are, whether it's in Jogja or in Manado or in Ambon and so on. So certainly, I mean, I think the first thing I say to students, first day, first lecture, first year, and intermediate post high school lecture, is Indonesia is a multilingual country. Very important. Indonesia is a multilingual country, and Indonesian is the national language, right? Which means that when students go there, they should expect different languages being spoken. Not be surprised and feel comfortable. That's important. Instead of, you know, not freak out.
Yeah.